Welcome from the deep. I'm Mike Finder.
And I am Book of Brett.
And today we're going to be talking about the 1962 film Dr. No. James Bond is something I've been meaning to get around to pretty much my entire life. It's just one of those film franchises I've never really gotten into. And
Really?
For no particular reason, I picked up the box set probably, that has got to been like 6 years ago at this point. It's the Blu-ray box set with every James Bond movie up to that point ever made.
Oh, I remember, because I remember working in restaurants at the time, being too broke to afford something like that, and watching somebody who doesn't love James Bond buy that, because I was like raised on James Bond.
It was like $120. It wasn't like I didn't spend like $900 on some crazy box set.
No, but I was a waiter, and let's be honest, most wait staff don't make enough money. So I couldn't afford it, but I was raised on James Bond. My dad and I, back like when I was a kid, my dad and I would watch like James Bond marathons when they would come on like cable television on like ABC or Fox or whatever the fuck it was playing on.
Yeah, no, I didn't do any of that. The only real experience I have with James Bond is GoldenEye and a couple of the Pierce Brosnan James Bonds from when we were growing up, and they were real big when we were kids.
Well, GoldenEye was Pierce Brosnan too.
No, that's what I meant GoldenEye the game, not GoldenEye the movie.
Oh,
I watched GoldenEye the movie, obviously, but when it came out, but GoldenEye the game is really where my any core James Bond knowledge that I have came from.
Yeah.
And then I just really never watched any of them. And when I bought that box set, I was thinking like, okay, sweet. I'll sit down and watch through all of these. And it just never happened. And there are a shitload of them.
I was going to say,
so many James Bond
there's like 27 of them, right?
Well, yeah, I know that now because the box set is 3 different cases and they're split up from years.
Yeah.
Yeah. I watched it on this. This is the 007 James Bond collection, and this is literally every single James Bond movie ever made up to that point. I think they've made 1 or 2 since this was released.
Are any of the Daniel Craig ones on there?
Yes, all of them except the latest, last 1 or 2.
He's such a good James Bond. I have heard rumors that Idris Elba has been considered for the next James Bond.
I've heard those rumors as well. I don't know how real that is, though.
I think Idris Elba would make an awesome James Bond. That dude is dapper. He is gorgeous. If I had a gay hall pass with Britney, Idris Elba, I think, would be my gay hall pass. Who would be your gay hall pass, Mike? But yeah, no, so I think Idris Elba would make a really good James Bond. They may have already picked the next James Bond. I can't remember.
Yeah, I'm seeing stuff over here about like him kind of being over it and not wanting to do it anymore.
Oh, yeah, because everybody made a big deal about his race, about it being a black James Bond.
Right.
Like
he said, the truth is I was super complimented for a long time. I was like, this is crazy because James Bond, we're all actors. We understand it's a role. It's one of those coveted roles. Being asked to be James Bond was like, okay, you've sort of reached that pinnacle. Essentially, it was a huge compliment that every corner of the world, except for some corners, which we will not talk about, were really happy about the idea that I could be considered. Those that weren't happy about the idea made the whole thing disgusting and off-putting because it became about race.
That is so...
It became about nonsense, and I got the brunt of it.
That is so depressing.
Yeah.
Like, to be over
he would be a good
role...
James Bond.
To be offered that role, like to even be offered it is amazing, right? But to be offered it, seriously considered, and then also be excited about it, and then have some group of assholes make it about his race so much that he's like, I don't even want to. Like, dude, that's fucking... Fuck, people are terrible.
Well,
Anyway,
yeah, today we're going to be talking about the original Dr. No. This is from 1962, like I said. This is Sean Connery. It's, this is just like got 60s
and no one else
coming out of the fucking wazoo.
Oh, yeah.
Do you want to go ahead and give us a synopsis of Dr. No from 1962?
Yes, and out of respect for James Bond and my love for James Bond, I won't even make it stupid this time. Dr. No is about James Bond traveling to the island of Jamaica to investigate the disappearance of a fellow agent, and then discovering that Dr. No has quite the stranglehold on the island and surrounding islands. And then
I didn't
having
know.
and then having to bring down Dr. No, because there's always the element of James Bond bringing down.
Or like Dr. No Hands. Am I
He's got
right?
hands.
He
They're
doesn't
just
have any hands.
He's got hands. They're just mechanical.
Mechanical hands. Yeah. So this was like kind of shocking to me. I went into this with as low of an expectation that I possibly could have. And
Yep.
I actually think that helped this movie a lot. I didn't expect
So
a whole
you did
lot out
like
of it because, to be honest, we'll get there. But to be honest, 60s film is not my favorite era. I start really getting into stuff around the 70s, like late 60s, early 70s.
Yes,
Early
it is.
60s stuff is not generally something that I like. So I was a little hesitant going into this, but I tried to keep an open mind as much as possible. And I actually ended up really enjoying this movie. Like, I expected to walk into this just being like, this is just stale and dull.
I did not expect you to like this.
And well, I got to tell you, it's the fact that it's like based in reality, but it's got this backbone of like sci-fi, and that's what was able to really pull me in.
Yeah, that's fair.
Because it's not something I was expecting. I mean, I know about James Bond and stuff, but it's not something I was thinking about when I think James Bond. For some reason, like the sci-fi element doesn't, I'm more versed in Austin Powers, and watching this made me realize how much Austin Powers was like riffing on James Bond and stuff like that, especially like even older cartoons and shit. You can see how this movie specifically really kind of set the whole tone for that whole special agent thing.
Even newer ones. Look at Archer, dude. Like, after watching this, like, you can see, like, I mean, like, it's they reference it so much in Archer, but once you watch a James Bond movie, you're like, oh, it's like really heavy on the references.
Yeah, well, and there was stuff that I off the top of my head right now, I can't think of anything specifically, but I was just watching this thinking, oh, I've seen that in cartoons. Oh, it's so in the zeitgeist and very like pop culture-ish but I didn't even realize how much I already kind of knew some of these scenes before actually watching this movie, just because it is so ingrained in pop culture.
Yeah.
That was kind of surprising.
It's there's a reason why Idris Elba called the role coveted.
Right.
Like,
how many people have ever played him? Like,
so there's Sean Connery, there's Roger Moore,
right?
There's Pierce Brosnan, Daniel Craig, and then there's a couple others that were like here and there in the main ones, and there was even one guy. Here. Okay, then yeah, probably 6.
Daniel Craig's the latest one, right?
Yeah. And like, to be clear, like, I love James Bond, but I am not like a James Bond expert or anything. And I feel like I should say that, because when you say you watch it and love it, it's one thing, but like people,
I feel like people nowadays of movies.
I feel like people just in general nowadays with movies, music, if you say you love something, but you don't know like the in-depth minutia of it and the hardcore details, they're like, you're not a true fan. Well, go get fucked. I love James Bond, and I'm not like a walking dictionary of James Bond. But the thing like that's so I think is so crazy about it is even like the role of the Bond girl at a certain point became super coveted in of itself. And I think that says a lot, because like James Bond gets a lot of shit for the womanizing aspect.
It's not nearly as bad as I thought it was going to be.
No, it really isn't. It's definitely,
that's
more
definitely
like
played up more than it actually is there if you actually go and watch it. It may get worse later, to be fair.
James, you're hurting me.
Felix, say hello to Dink.
Hi, Dink.
Dink, say goodbye to Felix. Man talk.
Bad.
Where is Ernst Stavro Blofeld? Speak up, darling. I can't hear you.
I don't know.
You sound like a cop to me.
Yeah, well, yeah, because if you listen to people, they make it sound like James Bond is as rapey as Sean Connery probably was in real life, and it's not that bad.
Allegedly.
Allegedly. He did have a penchant for, quote, smacking broads, but I guess that's fine. I don't know if that's a direct quote, by the way.
No, I remember that. There is audio.
It's an old
I've heard
Playboy
that
article.
audio before of him talking about how you have to slap women to keep them in line. Yeah.
Yeah, and then he and then I think there was one later where he retracted a little bit. And he was basically saying you shouldn't just go about hitting them, but like to break it down, he basically said in certain situations.
I don't think it's that bad. I think that it depends entirely on the circumstances and if it merits it.
What would merit it?
Well, if you have tried everything else, and women are pretty good at this, they can't leave it alone, then I think it's absolutely right.
To give her a good slap.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so he was born in 1930. So
Right.
at the point that this was made, he was 32 years old. And that was a completely different world. I'm not sticking up for what he said. I'm just like trying to put in context.
It's not that the act was ever okay,
Right.
but it was one of those things that said in the time it wasn't like crazy controversial or anything.
Yeah.
Which again, it's not good that it wasn't controversial, but I'm thinking that maybe it's possible because like when he was like, he later in like 2016, he said something about like basically it's never okay under any circumstance. And I think what we have here is a prime example of somebody being a product of their time, but then also being willing to change their outlook as time goes on. But either way, that's neither here nor there. Probably, allegedly, maybe a little rapey, maybe at least in a pushy kind of way. And again, it does get amped up in these movies a lot, but really what it is him just fucking a lot. Him doing a lot of fucking with a lot of beautiful women, and it's almost always like at least has an element of mutual of what's the word I'm looking for? Consent.
Careful, my nail varnish.
Be careful of her nail varnish.
And so I think really it gets played up a lot in a rapey way, but really what it is James Bond likes to fuck.
He do be some fucking.
He do be doing a lot of fucking. But that's the thing is like the role of the Bond girl became coveted. And I think a big part of that too is because like the Bond girl, even though it's always like a supermodel, and if you get cast as the Bond girl, like there are Bond girls, and then there's obviously like the main Bond girl of the movie. In this one, it's Honey Rider. I don't know I can't remember. It's Ursula something that plays Honey Rider.
Ursula Andress.
Yes. She was a supermodel. She was a Swedish supermodel in a day and age where Swedish supermodels were like the quintessential aspect of beauty, right? But she's still not like this weak damsel in distress type of character.
Right.
She is a strong character.
Well, and he meets like probably 3 or 4 different women before he even meets her.
Yes.
And she sticks out because she's such a strong character.
Which means he's fucking every 20 minutes.
I mean, that's not entirely untrue.
No,
she has kind of a, I want to kind of go through her thing real quick here. Casino Royale. So she's in the.
That's one of the non-neon. No, it's one of the non-neon ones, or non-eon films. So they're like considered. So Casino Royale they remade with Daniel Craig. I think it was the first one he was in.
Yeah.
This one is
from 1967.
Is not considered like an official Bond movie.
Oh, okay. Interesting.
So there's 25 Eon films and
'cause
2
you don't hear
non-neon films. You don't hear.
You don't hear about David Niven being
No,
considered.
which is the most British name.
Oh, David Niven.
Oh, Nivens. Although, but it sounds like the name of a butler, not a James Bond character. Like, Nivens, is lunch ready?
All right. Well, do you want to go ahead and give me your main thoughts on Dr. No? I'll give you mine. Then we'll talk a little bit specifics / spoilers. Not really anything to spoil in this one specifically.
No.
And then we'll give our ratings for the film. If you want to go ahead and start us off here.
Yeah, James Bond. I mean, James Bond. Dr. No, it was, this is one I have not watched in a very, very long time. It is one of the ones I watched with my dad when we used to watch the marathons. So I personally could not be going into this one any more biased. It's not possible. But revisiting it, I was going into it having been used to a lot of the newer ones. They're a bit more, over the top. Like Mike said, this one's rooted a lot more or grounded a lot more in reality, I think. And I was pleasantly surprised by it. Sean Connery is and probably will continue to be one of the, or in my opinion, the best Bond of them all. And it was really cool to watch a Sean Connery Bond film again. But more than that, it was really cool to go into this with a cinematic viewpoint. Because I haven't watched these older ones for years, and certainly well before I had made any movies, had any interest in film or anything like that. And to watch it from that lens was even more exciting for me. Like even that very, very first scene where they're outside before we even get in and see Bond. You see the shadow ratio, you see them filming on the shadow side. And for some reason, to me, I felt like it was going to be a lot more flat. I thought there was going to be a lot less attention paid to the cinematic aspect of the lighting, of the cinematography. But I think a lot of that's because there's so many action films out there now where the focus is explosions and over the top action that when you see this, it really, really stands out when you see a movie built cinematically, but also with a very not a higher minded subject matter.
Yeah, I think that
now you say something.
I think that the cinematography might be one of the best things about this movie.
It's really good.
I have been obsessed with photography from the 50s and 60s lately.
When he was born is what he meant.
And what?
Because you're old.
You're older than I am.
Yes.
So anyway, I've been obsessed with photography from the 50s and 60s lately, specifically
interesting,
like tiki culture and shit like that.
That is not what I expected you to say.
Why?
I don't know. I expected portraiture from the 50s and 60s or landscape photography.
No, well, I mean, if you go look at my
Not
photography, maybe you could understand where I'm coming from, and that's kind of where the inspiration for my photography lately has been coming from. And I've been kind of living in this 60s era aesthetics of photography lately. And so watching this, it was like all that shit just fucking came to life. Because I've been so heavily just ingesting all of this still imagery from this era, watching this movie was it was just right where my head was at the time. And I've been getting a lot more into sci-fi recently.
Finally,
everything just kind of came to a head, and I ended up really enjoying this. I think this is well written. The dialogue is surprisingly good for the era. The action is awesome, even if they do try to make a fist fight seem like what we try to make someone jumping out of a plane or something looks like now. Especially with the soundtrack and him beating the spider with the shoe, and the soundtrack lines up with him beating it. There's a lot of stuff like that where they really try to amp up what's happening, and it's frankly not that exciting. But I can't really hold that against it. A, because of how well this is shot, and B, because of the time period. With what they're working with and everything being done practically, that fucking explosion at the end that they don't even let play through all the way. Like they cut before the fucking thing is even finished. It's like, I was sitting there watching that going, they just blew up an entire building and they didn't even bother using the entire fucking clip. They just cut away from it and kept fucking moving.
Well, because back then it was like, well, how else do you do that? We don't have to. This is just how you do it.
It's just with all the practical effects, the action being really good, the dialogue being really great, the plot being actually really interesting. I think Dr. No is a great villain.
Yeah,
just in
he's
general,
really good.
I think he's
creepy as shit.
He's creepy. He's scary. He has great motivation for doing what he's doing. And it's just all around, dude. It's just like, this is a really fun, older 60s action movie.
Look up the guy that played Dr. No. I can't remember his name.
Dr. No, I hardly know her.
Oh, God. I hate that joke finally worked and it's on camera. The fight scenes, you know how, like, there's two versions of, like, when you're in a dream fight? Like, there's the one where you move in slow motion and you lose. And then there's always one where that seems like it works in regular motion and you win, but it's not realistic.
Yeah.
This is the fight where you win. That's how they filmed every one of these fight sequences. So yeah, did you look the guy up that played Dr. No?
Yeah, I did. So his name is Joseph Wiseman.
Yes. Yes. Does it say what his nickname used to be?
What his
it does on Wikipedia
used to be?
It does on Wikipedia. It was like the darkest man. Yeah. Yeah, like the darkest man on the stage, or like the creepiest,
the spookiest actor in the American theater.
Yes. Yeah. So I say that because I think it's a very, I think that's why they picked him, because there is something so unnerving about him. Like when you first see him, and you saw that picture, so they obviously had like some kind of makeup on, or, you know, excuse me. They obviously had some kind of like makeup that going on with him as well, but there is just something so unnerving about his deliveries and the way he carries himself and the way he speaks.
Well, he's very like proper and like upscale and yes. He's a calm psychopath, which makes him even scarier. Yeah.
Yes.
He doesn't play him up like, I'm a crazy maniac. He's just this very level-headed, like matter-of-fact bad guy. And I love that. And I love that he explains what Spectre is. And I love the idea of Spectre. It's such a cool idea of these guys that are like the greatest criminal minds in the world get together to try to like take it over. I love that idea. It's such like a 60s idea.
Well, that's the thing, man. Is like people think like 007 being an agent and it being an agent designation instead of a particular person is what has like what keeps the series going for so long and through so many movies. I think it explains why we get different 007s, but I think the thing that keeps Spectre going, like the element that was ingenious to keep this thing going for so long, is the element of Spectre. Because with Spectre in there, you now have a never-ending supply of villains, because even if it's decades later, they're gonna recruit new supervillains. And so Spectre is really this element that just allows this to go on forever. So honestly, I think Spectre is the thing that keeps the franchise going, and not just James Bond himself. At least in the background, not obviously James Bond is what people are coming for.
Well, I mean, if you can make James Bond as cool as possible, but if he doesn't have badass villains to fight, then like none of it works. Let me ask you this. Do they mention James Bond being a different person as somebody new, as a new actor takes over the role, or is it just sort of skipped over?
You know, I don't watch these in order. This isn't fucking Lord of the Rings where you can sit down and watch like the first three.
Look at how fucking big this book is.
So that's the thing with James Bond, is even though like I love the movies, I do watch. I'd say I probably watch one a year at some point. It's not like, you know, Christmas movies obviously, or like holiday movies, but I don't. Like I haven't watched the ones where we get a new one enough. It'll just usually be one that I pick, and when you've got 27 to pick from, and there's 6 James Bonds, the ratio of you watching the ones where they switch often is pretty low.
Right.
So I don't know, but I do. I feel like, and somebody will correct us in the comments because you fuckers always do. They pretty much just say 007.
Well, I found a
feel
Reddit
like they
post.
just kind of carry it over.
I found a Reddit post about this. He said, my girlfriend asked me a question while watching Tomorrow Never Dies and noticed Judi Dench as M, similar to the newer movies. Does M know that 007 is a different person, or is he supposed to be the same person and just played by a different actor? This top comment here says, Bond doesn't really work within a conventional canon versus non-canon approach that's been popularized in the last few decades. It's more fuzzy, and if you're looking for clear guidelines or cutoff points, you'll be confused and disappointed. It's closer to The Simpsons or even South Park. They stay the same age, but still reference topical events of the time the episode is released in. I like
That's a really good way of looking
that.
at it.
Yeah, I like that way of looking at
because
it.
because as you were reading that, I realized, well, he's not just 007. He's also always called James Bond.
Always.
So
yes.
duh,
So it wouldn't
which-
make sense for them to. Yeah.
It's been a long day.
Yeah. So
It's been a long day.
Well, and as somebody who has never watched any of the other ones, really, I mean, I watched those Pierce Brosnan, like one or two of them. But dude, I was a literal child when I watched those.
Right.
So
you weren't into it. So you weren't into him as a kid.
not at all. I wasn't into
No?
Star Wars or
See,
James Bond or anything.
I
Dude,
know
I was
you weren't into Star Wars.
Horror.
That's not what you're supposed to be into as a kid. This is what you were supposed to be into as a kid. Spies and espionage and
I was into
you know,
Three Ninjas. Does that count?
It does. You get major points for Three Ninjas.
Well, I don't know, man. All in all, I actually really like this, and I was not expecting to like it at all. I
Yeah,
was
I didn't
very
expect you to
fucking.
either.
I was very fucking surprised at how actually good this movie is, how well it holds up, and how badass Sean Connery is.
Yeah.
Now,
Oh yeah.
with that being said, I kind of feel like this is a big statement. We got to at least get through the Sean Connery movies. How
Fine.
many
Yes,
Sean Connery
absolutely.
movies did
7.
they make? They made 7 Sean Connery 007 movies.
Uh-huh. But you already said it. You already said it. You said we have to. So we have to. And all of you heard it, which means we're going to do that. Obviously, it won't be like the next 7 episodes, but yes, absolutely.
So then he
and
was
then
in.
What's great?
This is one of the cases, by the way,
Uh-huh.
that came in this box set.
Open it. I might be wrong. Is there
One
7?
of them.
3, 5, 7.
So just in this box is 1962 to 1977. And so if you're right,
he
it's
just
Dr.
gets
No,
better.
From Russia with Love, Goldfinger, Thunderball, You Only Live Twice, On Her Majesty's
good one.
Secret Service.
That's a really good one.
And
Yeah.
then maybe Diamonds Are Forever.
What do you mean maybe?
That's number 7. I mean, I'm trying to figure out which one of these is Sean Connery
Oh.
movies. Can't read that.
We'll just look it up real quick. Because after we finish off Sean Connery, we get to, I believe, into the worst of the Bonds. So we get to go straight from the best of the Bonds to the worst of the Bonds. But I think he was only in 2 or 3 of them. And that is Roger Moore.
Well, according to this, he made 7 movies between 1962 and 1983, but
Roger Moore? Maybe I'm
no,
not
Sean
thinking-
Connery.
Oh, okay.
So yeah, Dr. No, From Russia with Love, Goldfinger, Thunderball, You Only Live Twice, Diamonds Are Forever, and then Never Say Never Again. Okay, I don't know. There's too many of these. Brett,
There's a
why'd
lot
you
of
rope
them.
us into this? There's too many of these fucking movies.
Because you actually suggested this. I okayed it because it was my turn to pick one, but you're the one that suggested this. Yeah. So after this, we do get to go into Roger Moore, who was another good James Bond. At some point, though, we get to experience the train wreck that is George Lazenby. The only James Bond to only appear once.
Oh, he only made
One time.
One
He
James
only
Bond movie?
did one.
Which
He's the
one?
only one too. I don't remember. Nobody ever remembers. I mean, somebody will remember, But here, let's look it up real quick. He was in.
Her Majesty's Secret Service.
Yep.
So,
Yep. So,
all right. Well, let's get into some specifics about this one because this is not. I will say this: not a lot happens in this movie, but also quite a bit happens in this movie, and it's kind of weird in that way. It's actually written really well, and the pacing is actually surprisingly good for the time period.
yeah,
which is surprising.
It's realistic. That's what.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's the big thing. Is I love the opening scene where we actually get to see the guy murdered and taken away, and James Bond being given this mission to go find him. I actually really dig that entire scene, and because it's such an older movie, they really take their time getting in there, which is not necessarily always a good thing. But in this, it really feels. I don't know. There's something about the pacing of 60s movies that is just very calming to me. And in this, it's very, the pacing is perfect. It's like, I was never fucking bored the entire time. And that's shocking to me because of how fucking old this movie is, and especially from the 60s. Have you watched much cinema from the 60s? It's not. It doesn't.
Nothing comes to mind.
It doesn't really hold up
automatically.
that well. Typically,
No. I'm trying to think of something that I've watched from the 60s. I can't think of anything.
Planet of the Apes,
Planet. I always feel like that's from the
2001.
70s.
Night of the Living Dead, Rosemary's Baby. I mean, there's not really anything really to spoil in this movie so much. Like I said earlier, I think that talking about this film is kind of strange because there's not really anything outside of that massive explosion at the end and what's his face getting lit on fire. Quarrel being lit on fire is just, I was so fucking unexpected, and it happened so quickly.
It was
And
very.
Bond reacts
it was
to
very
it.
like, oh.
Bond reacts to it in like no fucking way at all. Like it's this guy that's been helping him throughout the entire movie. She has a bigger reaction to him dying than Bond does, which I guess is fair because Bond is more used to it or whatever. But still, it's just like zero reaction from Bond when Quarrel dies.
Right.
Yeah,
no. It's.
But
it's very like they got another one.
yeah. Oh darn! There goes that guy. But there's not really anything specifically that like we can pick apart and stuff like that. Like we usually would. Like, what does this mean? What does that mean? This is very bare bones filmmaking, but in a way that is timeless and that really hold up. I think that more than anything is what you can say about when you make a film, A, all practically, B, a slow pace like this, and C, with a really well-written script. You don't need all of that extra bullshit. And so it just, that's the reason this movie is so timeless and still holds up, because it is a very strong foundation of really basic, well-made filmmaking. And
Do you think it's possible? Do you think it's possible to go back to something like this? Like with the
making
way
movies like this?
Like not making movies exactly like this, but having like some kind of like spy movie that actually like feels grounded in reality?
No, because I don't know if well, I mean, what was that Michael Fassbender movie recently where he's an assassin on Netflix?
Isn't it just called The Assassin?
The Killer? Or Killer?
The Killer. That was really good. But it was also kind of I don't know, at a certain point.
The Killer,
like,
yeah.
It didn't have the mastery that I think this does.
I don't know. David Fincher's pretty damn good, man. I don't know.
No, he's good. I just like that movie as a whole.
You didn't like The Killer?
I did not say that.
I mean, you basically just did. Let me look up on my Letterboxd what I rated it. I rated it a 7.
What did I rate it?
7.
Okay. Yeah, I liked it.
You literally said slow pace.
Yeah.
Why do I do this with you?
I don't know. I've been asking myself the same question for years.
But all right, well, with all that out of the way, I mean, I think that there's a reason why this holds the test of time. But I'm interested to see how you feel about this, going back to this all the way back from your childhood, and looking at this with like a critic's eye, because watching a movie from the perspective of I have to review this really changes how you watch stuff. It really changes it a lot. And we've only done a handful of stuff of movies that I really hold dear from when I was a kid. So considering how attached you are to this movie, I'm interested to see what you have to say about this.
I think this is the most I've ever liked this movie. I mean, it's still the movie that it is, but as far as like how I've felt about it, every time I've watched it, going into it with a critical eye made it even better. It made it even better because I already had the nostalgia attached to it. I knew I was going to like Dr. No going into Dr. No. I knew that was going to happen.
Right.
I knew that there was no way we were going to go. The worst that was going to happen was me going, I used to love this as a kid, and now it's kind of lost some of its luster. And the exact opposite ended up happening, where I ended up loving it for what it was, loving Sean Connery as James Bond, loving the character of James Bond, even though I can see, like, you know, how maybe some of his antics might be a little problematic now in this day and age when we translate them, but still not as bad as they're made out to be. But even that, like, I went into it like thinking, like having that thought of like, what am I going to expect through the eye of someone who, you know, things have changed, things have evolved. How am I going to feel about that? And I actually went into it going like, oh, it's actually not that bad. But then I got to go into it from the other side of the cinematography, the lighting, the camera movements. What is the shot saying for what we're seeing? The set design, which we've said fuck all about, is amazing.
It's fucking amazing.
It's huge. It's practical. Somebody built it with their fucking hands. Except the island that, you know, just volcanoes. But other than that, people built it with their hands. And so it made me appreciate it even more, but it made me revisit the appreciation that I already had. I'm going to rate it as, you know, a 60s action spy movie. And in that context, I think it's a 10 out of 10. Wow. I think it's a 10 out of 10. I think it's perfect. I have no complaints about it. I have no complaints other than the not kung fu fight scenes, which it gets a total pass on because everybody was doing that. It gets a complete 100 pass on that for me. It's perfect. It's perfect.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, for me, considering I have no nostalgia for this, and I really walked into this really seeing it as an adult for the first time, I can see why this would spark a franchise. This is a very well-made movie. The cinematography is phenomenal. There are certain shots once they get on that island that are just ridiculous. I mean, it is just ridiculous.
They blew up a whole building.
Well, it's not even just that, man. It's just the composition and shit that they were doing way back then. Dude, it is mind-blowing. You can really tell the cinematographer really gave a shit when he was filming this movie. And then you think about all of the practical shit, the fact that this was shot on film, taped together to edit, like, you know what I mean? When you really start to break down how this was made, it's just phenomenal. And I was not expecting to say that going into this. This has really made me curious to go through and watch some of the other James Bond movies. I don't know if they're going to hold up as much as this one did, but
they don't have to. We're going to watch them.
We're not watching all 27 of them. I'll tell you that right now. I'm not doing that.
We are.
No.
Yes, we are. No, we're not going to do them like back to back.
We'll get through some of the Sean Connery movies and we'll go from there. But dude, honestly, this is really what?
No, we're watching all of them.
No,
we're not doing it back to back to back, but we're doing all the James Bond movies.
Yeah, sure. Totally.
That's
So
fine.
for
I'll
me,
just keep track of them, and then as you forget which ones we did, I'll just go to the ones we haven't done, and I'll be like, "Hey, this is the movie I want to do."
so all in all, I really enjoyed it and was surprised thoroughly by it. And Sean Connery's a badass. The music is good. The fucking plot's great. The acting is good. The costumes are good. The set design's great. The lighting is very 60s-ish and very like soap opera-y and filling and just bathing entire rooms in light and not really paying any attention to that kind of stuff. But that's just the way shit was done back then. And
Yep.
you know, it's considering how old it is phenomenal. So I went ahead and rated this an 8 out of 10. I think this is very fucking strong. I do not think it's perfect. But as a
'Cause
first
you're wrong.
watch, God damn it, I was very fucking impressed by this, man. Very, very, very impressed by this.
Yep.
Anyway, if you like this, make sure you hit the like button. If you really liked it, make sure you hit the subscribe button. Hopefully this does well, because despite what you say, I do feel like we should go through some more of these Sean Connery movies for sure.
And then the preceding 21.
Yeah, no, we'll talk about that off air, and you're wrong. So I just think that this is definitely worth exploring. I considering how fucking much fun I had with this movie. These movies are for sure worth exploring. So let us know how you feel about James Bond down in the comments. If you like Dr. No, let us know. If you didn't, I'd really be interested to hear why somebody wouldn't like this, and maybe just somebody's sensibilities don't align with the pacing and the just overall 60s-ness of it. But that is what gives it so much goddamn charm. That when she pulls the right before the secretary gets killed, she pulls the book down, and it's like this flat book panel with a radio behind it. And I was just like, A, that wouldn't fool anybody. B, that's such a 60s mentality thing to have of like, yeah, we'll hide it behind these books, see? And nobody will be able to tell the difference.
So what do we do about the paneling? Paneling? No one's looking for paneling. Put cardboard.
I'll put a little pull tab on it to make it easy.
No one will ever be the wiser. They're not from England.
But yeah, let us know how you feel about this down in the comments, and we will see you guys next time from the deep. Bye-bye.